Okay, awesome. Can everyone hear me and see me okay? My good, Beck? Awesome. Hi everyone, I'm Tori, and I am an alcoholic, and I'm really grateful to be here. I'm also really nervous. It's been a long time since I've been on screen. I've just kind of been hiding out in my little rural hometown of Humboldt County over here. I have my two home group meetings that I go to on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and they're both pretty small and intimate, and those people have become like my family in this journey. And so I think it's good for me to get out of my comfort zone a little bit. But I do apologize if I stumble, have awkward humanness. But I guess I am human, right? After all. So I don't know. I have never been to this meeting before. I really enjoyed the readings leading up to it. So thank you all for that and for the format. Um, I typically start with where I think my journey in alcoholism and AA started in recovery, and go back to like the beginning of where I can first see kind of the signs and symptoms of what I call, for lack of a better word, the spiritual discontent, or that internal dis-ease, being at dis-ease. And I remember like my earliest memories from like kindergarten, actually, of just like this deep innate sense of feeling alien in the world. um and I don't really understand where that came from. I had a loving family and a nice home, and I had safety, and yet I was so uncomfortable in my own skin. um and I remember like going to school in kindergarten and thinking to myself, um if these people see who I really am, they're not going to love me and they're going to reject me. And I remember like hiding things about myself at a young age, and I immediately started to think that like I needed to wear a mask or put on a persona to other people in order to be okay. Um and I share that because like that kind of thinking that permeated me from such a young age, this like feeling of being so different from everyone else, and that I needed to pretend in order to be accepted, and that I was never going to have this sense of belonging that I was craving, led me to all these different ways of coping. And at first, like that started with just hiding and avoiding people. And so from all my formative years, I didn't have any friends, or I had imaginary friends, and I did video games and read fantasy books and tried to create like my own worlds to be okay. But I still had this deep longing for connection and love, and I didn't have friends or peers. And when I tried to interact with people my age, I just couldn't connect. I was so full of this like loud voice in my head that was like any interaction I had, I would go home and agonize for hours about how awkward I was and what they must have thought of me. And I remember like the first kind of euphoric social react like connections that I had. My parents would have these dinner parties when I was like 13, 14, and they would let me be the bartender for all of their friends that would come over. And so they would teach me. I got all these different like bartending books and learned how to mix all these drinks and use the shakers and do the different things. And like I started to connect that these people were experiencing like joy and laughter and connection. And here was this like elixir that was apparently a part of all of that. And it was the first kind of time that I got this taste of feeling comfortable and a part of before I even picked up the drink. Um, and I started to associate it with this power and this confidence and this euphoria. And when I was 15, I drank for the first time. And I remember it was like my mom had finally had enough with my antisocial behavior and said, you know, you need to learn how to socialize, you need to push yourself. And I was in high school and she was like, you have to choose a sport, like just go choose something. And so in my rebellious, defiant nature, I was like, fuck you, I guess I will choose golf because it's the most solitary sport that I can think of. And what happened is I joined this golf team on my high school, and I got invited to my first ever high school party. And there was that sense of acceptance that I was looking for. And I remember drinking. And for me, you know, I know I've related with lots of people over the years, and sometimes it grows slowly over time. But for me, that effect that I got that alcohol produced, like the very first reading that we drink because we like the effect that was produced, like that effect was immediate. Like the first time I drank, it was like this warm sensation in my body where all of a sudden that feeling, that anguish that I had been feeling my whole life of just being like crawling out of my skin, the anxiety, the fear, the insecurity, the questioning, the yapping, insistent, critical, judging voice that I had in my head that would never shut up. Like I drank and it started to just quiet down and everything in my body loosened and I could just breathe. And it was like this. And at the same time, on the flip side of that coin, that night, like as soon as I started drinking, I wanted more. And that feeling I started chasing. And I drank to like I blacked out my first time I drank. I drank to oblivion. And I blacked out and I made a fool of myself and I was dancing ridiculously and messy and sloppy. And like that probably should have, in hindsight, been kind of humiliating and embarrassing that I acted that way. But what I remember about the morning after, when I woke up, there was that first initial humiliation of like, oh my God, what did I do? But then the very next thought that quickly came after it was, I got to do that again. I just need to figure out how to do that better because this is everything I've been looking for. This is the feeling that I've been longing for. Um, and it was kind of like off to the races. Like it became all of a sudden I went from this person who had been alone for my whole life up until 15 to now I was going to high school parties and I was hanging out with the cool kids and I was getting invited and alcohol and drugs were a part of it. I associated it with that status and I was loving it for that effect and I was having a blast. And what I think of when I think of the progression of the disease now, looking back, what I couldn't see then is that the way that it progressed, I love analogies, and an analogy that I like to use to understand it better is that it's kind of like a dimmer switch on a light bulb. Like in the beginning of my drinking, I could control that dimmer switch. And if I wanted that light and I wanted that effect and I wanted the power of the ability to like socialize and be confident and crack jokes and not be afraid and like the things that it was giving me, um, I could put my hand on the knob and I could kind of control the intensity. And if I needed to turn it down, I could turn it down and I could go back to school and I could function and I could get up the next day. And what I didn't realize is that the progression meant to me that over time, that dimmer knob was getting worn out and I was losing the ability to control it once I started. And it was kind of turning into not so much a dimmer switch and more of just like an on and off switch that once I hit some certain point, if it was on, it was on, and I couldn't get it to turn off, no matter how it was destroying my life or what the consequences were. And I think that like from the ages of like 15, I graduated high school and I could kind of start to see that I went from this honor roll student who was getting a 4.0 GPA to I didn't really care about my grades that much anymore. I cared more about hanging out with my friends and partying, and my grades started to drop. And that was kind of the beginning warning signs of like my priorities were shifting a little bit. And I graduated high school and I went to community college, and it started to become harder and harder for me to keep both in check. And I started getting worse grades and missing tests and being too drunk to show up. But I was still able to, pass the classes in the end, and didn't really see a significant problem with it. And then when I was 21 years old, I was finally legal and moved, transferred to go to college at a state college to get my bachelor's degree. And I moved away from home and I moved away from my parents. And I think part of controlling that had been like, I got to keep it together because my parents are there and I'm under their roof and I'm abiding by their rules. And so when I moved away to be a college student, I moved into the 21 and older dorms where partying was this accepted culture. It was part of the lifestyle. It was now totally justified and normal to do these things. This is what all the college kids do. And it gave me this like no holds bar, like I don't have anyone watching me that knows me anymore. And I can completely give in to this thing that I had already developed this like love and reliance upon. Um, and so within like that period, it was like a very quick downward spiral for me. Like the moment that I kind of released that pressure valve, it was like took over my life in this way, and I share about it. Like I didn't even, what's so baffling to me about the progression too, now looking back on it, is like as it was happening and as this elixir was like taking a more important role in my life and I was turning to it more and more and more and relying on it more and more and more to be okay. Again, like the thing said that I totally relate to, my alcoholic life was becoming the only normal one. I could no longer imagine my life and dealing with life and moving through life without it. Right? Like when I came in, I couldn't imagine, like, how in the hell am I going to get through my first birthday? How am I going to get through my first Christmas? How am I going to get through, the first time having a romantic relationship sober, or my first breakup sober, or all these things? Like it, over those formative years, was what I turned to for everything. And at the same time, I didn't see clearly how dependent I was becoming upon it, how I was restless, irritable, and discontent and not okay unless I could have it. And in that period when I moved here, like when I first moved here, I had that justification. I was like, okay, it's totally normal. This was my thinking, where I'm like, college kids do this and it's totally fine if I drink on Fridays and Saturdays because that's when all the kids party. And as long as I recover on Sunday, I can go back to school on Monday and I can go to school. And if I'm doing what I need to do, then I can, work hard and party hard and it's all good. But I couldn't, like there was something in my head that would always justify more and always lay out this beautifully intricate story about, and sometimes it wasn't even that beautiful or intricate, it was just like this idea that would take over of like, yeah, well, but what about this, how about this? And I could justify and rationalize more, adding more of it to my life. And so it started to take over, and then it was like, okay, I'll do Thursdays because there's Thirsty Thursdays, and that's like a really good deal. And so I was drinking Thursday, Friday, Saturday, recovering on Sunday. And then it was Well Wednesdays, and I added Wednesday into the mix. And then it was $2 Tuesdays at the bar. And so I added that into the mix. And then on Monday, here where I'm from, we have this like huge party on Monday called Reggae Mondays. And so I was like, got to do that. And now I'm drinking, Monday through Saturday, and I can't just recover on Sunday. I can't just detox on Sunday because I was going into withdrawal. So now on Sunday, I just kind of nurse myself back. And so before I knew it, I guess what I'm trying to convey is that like it wasn't a conscious decision in the way that it felt. It wasn't like I'm going to go to college and I'm going to start drinking every day and this is what my life is going to look like. It was this really creepy, insidious, subtle undertone in the way that I thought and justified what I was doing to make sense. And before I knew it, I'm stepping back and I'm drinking every single day, and I can't stop drinking because I'll start detoxing, and I have to wake up in the morning and drink in order to be able to get anything down. And then the next thing you know, I'm waking up in the morning with shakes and I'm vomiting, and I have to drink enough vodka to stop vomiting. And I all the while just like didn't even really see or what like was cognitively aware of how far off the rails I had come. Um and I don't know like what like sometimes I try to pinpoint this like moment of clarity, like what brought me to recovery? What was the turning point that opened me up to being willing to walk into a room of complete strangers and be open to something that was so not even in my conception of like Alcoholics Anonymous or this program of people. Um, and I think like where I was at that time was like, I am now drinking consistently every single day. And that feeling that it used to treat in me, that restless, irritable, discontent, um, insatiable anxiety, like in the beginning that it treated so well and so instantaneously, it stopped being able to treat it in proportion to the consequences that I was getting. Like it was just like I couldn't get enough. Like even if I drank to oblivion and would black out, I would wake up the next day and all of those problems that I was running from were right in front of me, and I could start again. But then I'd wake up the next day and they're there and they're right there again, and I have that deep void in my gut that like I could not consume enough or run away fast enough to get away from the pain anymore of what it felt like to have just this fucking void, this emptiness, this feeling of hopelessness and powerlessness that like nothing I could do was ever going to feel okay. I couldn't get peace. I couldn't get quiet. And it was just anguish. And so I think I had reached this place of like anguish and disgust in what I was doing. And I don't know like where the idea came from to go to AA because I had like no good conceptions about AA. I just thought I had all these stereotypes about like what AA was or what it looked like. But somewhere inside of me, there must have been this idea that like maybe there are people out there that know something that I don't know. And there was this enough of a crack in me that I was willing to walk in. I still remember like how terrifying it was to go to my first meeting ever, where I went to this tiny little room at the college campus that I was at, and it was an all women's meeting, and it was only like 6 or 7 women there, so it was super comfortable. But I, looking back on it, it was like as chill as it could possibly be. But I remember like pacing back and forth in the hallway of this campus, like for 20 minutes in pure terror of walking through that door. And it was one of the doors that has like a window in it. So I would like try to act totally chill and normal and like walk by the door and like look in at everybody and be like, oh, what are they doing in there? And then I go really quick to the water fountain and drink a bunch of water and like come back and try to be nonchalant. And like the courage that it took for me to walk into that room for the first time, terrified of these strangers. And I'm so grateful for whatever desperation or pain I was in to cross that threshold. Because I found so much just like warmth and acceptance there. And I was still wildly uncomfortable and insecure. And I was sitting in the back of the meeting, and I had just um I had just stopped drinking like hours before. So it was still like drunk and in my system. And, I remember my going back just a little bit, like the night before that moment of like, um, actually going back a little bit before that, speaking to that pain that I'm trying to convey to the best of my ability. I had this period of like 7 days before I walked into that room. That's kind of important. I don't want to like skip over that, where I knew that I could no longer keep doing what I was doing. And um I had just like, I guess the facade was failing in the sense that I had been hiding this from my parents and was using all of my student loan money to drink and to party, and I was no longer able to show up to classes because I'm drinking consistently now, and I'm flunked out of school. So like the whole jig was up, and like I failed all my classes. My mom found out I failed all my classes. She cut me off financially, and it was this moment of like everything that I've been trying to hold together and still get this relief and still continue to consume what I think I need in order to be okay and hold this all together had fallen apart. And so that was the crack that I'm talking about, in like the ability to see like I can't hold all this together and continue to rely on this drugs and alcohol and the way that I'm living life. But I'm also totally screwed because I can't stop turning to drugs and alcohol because I have no other way to handle what's going on inside of me and how uncomfortable I feel. And so it was this like totally hopeless, defeating feeling of like, I cannot imagine my life without this thing. And I also can see no way forward, but maybe there are people out there that have some kind of an idea that I don't have about what the hell to do about this. And so that was that clicking moment of like, maybe I should walk into this room, even though it's scary and even though it's terrifying, and just be open to something new and something different. And I still am amazed that people do that. Like anytime I see a newcomer walk through the doors for the first time, I'm just like, dude, hell yeah. Because like whatever it takes to walk through those doors is incredibly inspiring to me. I know how hard it was for me to do that. And that was a crucial moment in my life. That was, I don't know exactly how many days. I love that you guys count days, but that was, I'm gonna look it up. That was 3,584 days ago, since I've had to pick up a drink or drug in order to be okay. And that to me is the miracle of the program. Um, that's not me in on my own. That's not me on my best ideas, because those 7 days before I walked into the meeting were 7 days where I was trying all of my best ideas to stay sober. And that was I was writing lists about everything that I love and all of the reasons why I shouldn't keep doing what I'm doing, and all of the people that I've hurt, and all of the things that I've destroyed and ruined and regret, and, everything that I'm sorry about. And while all of that, and all the things that I want for myself, that I want to take care of my body, and I want to be healthy, and I want to be able to do this. And like, while all of that stuff is now genuinely a huge part of my recovery and really inspiring, I had this experience of like trying to use all of my best ideas to stay sober and to change and to recover and to have this shift and to feel okay. And I couldn't do it. And so that was important in opening me up to just help, quite simply, like genuinely trying it all the ways that I thought would work, and not having the tools or the capacity to do it on my own. And that was really hard for me, being like an intellectual biology major, to swallow and stomach, because up until that point, everything was about intellectualizing and flow charting and Excel spreadsheets and experimentation. And like, if I could figure it out and understand addiction, and if I could fully understand and write all these lists and do all these things, then I could be okay. But I had tried all that with school. I had intellectualized, I'd written it all up on the whiteboard, and I within myself didn't have what I needed to recover, and it didn't work. And so I was finally willing to try something different and walk through those doors, and I was accepted and welcome. And the women immediately were like, came up to me after the meeting and were like, hey, can we do anything for you? Like, do you have any questions? We're here for you. What did you think of the meeting? And I was like, yeah, it was fine. I don't know what to think, and they were like, well, do you think maybe you'll come back and try another meeting? And I was like, yeah, I could consider that. And they're like, cool, well, there's another one after this if you want to go with us. And I had nothing going on. So I ended up getting in the car with those people and having, genuine connection, and going to this other meeting where I found my first sponsor, who would kind of walk me through what the 12-step process was. And so for me, I had a issue with the God word in AA, because I was coming from a family, being a queer person, where I was coming from the experience of a queer person who was told by their family that they were condemned to go to hell, and that, I had this deep feeling of like rejection and pain. And so because of that, I didn't want anything to do with God, or anything that had anything to do with this God that was going to have any kind of authority or judgment over my life. And thankfully, I still don't have to have that kind of God. And so I'm really grateful that at that state where I was open and willing, I found a sponsor that broke things down for me in the 12-step realm in a very simple, practical way, and could explain it to me in a way that my intellectual scientific mind could understand. That was really important for me. And the way she approached it changed everything, because she was like, why don't you just approach the 12 steps of recovery like you would approach anything else with the scientific method? Like, why don't you pretend like it is an experiment, and you don't know what the effects of the experiment are going to be before you actually do the experiment, right? And she's like, if you were to plan an experiment for school, and you're setting up all these variables, and you have this hypothesis, and you say, hey, I think the problem is I have this disease called alcoholism. I have this disease called addiction, and I have lost control. My life is unmanageable in this area. I might be competent in all these other areas, and my rational thinking and all these other things that I tried to do, and all the tools that I have work to function in all these other areas. But in this one area, when it comes to drugs and alcohol, you have this disease of addiction, and that you think is your hypothesis of the problem, and that you think that if you apply the solution of the 12 steps, it might change you and it might heal or treat that problem. So your hypothesis is here's the problem and the solution is this treatment. You just go through these steps. And she's like, if this was an experiment and you were setting it up that way and you went into it, but you had all of these biases and you already had these ideas of what you were going to experience and what you were going to feel and what the answer was going to be and what was going to happen after you did this thing, if you did that in the scientific realm, wouldn't you be biasing the experiment? Wouldn't it be like a faulty, like it wouldn't be solid, it wouldn't be truth, it wouldn't be discovery, because you would have all of these preconceptions going into it. And I was like, oh shit, you're right. That does make sense. I can get that in my own language, in my own world. And she's like, what if you just approach the 12 steps like that? What if it's just an experiment and you don't know what the result or experience you're going to have with steps 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5 are before you do them? But then after you do them, you're going to get some kind of result or effect or experience. And then you'll have that evidence of whatever the hell that is. And so it was how lucky I still am so grateful that it was this relatable, achievable thing that like I could get down with. Like I didn't have to. I love, again, loving the freaking readings of this meeting where it says I didn't have to swallow anybody else's truth. I didn't have to deny any of my own truths. It could literally just be an open-minded, open-hearted experience. And so I thought to myself, well, I don't really have any other better options. I can go back to living life the way I was, but I'm genuinely hopeless and miserable. Like at that point, I was suicidal and I was having a hard time conceiving of a life without deep anguish and pain. And here are these people that I was starting to interact with as I was going to these meetings and I was kind of opening up to the idea of maybe wanting to try this thing. And then the first thing that like the warmth, the acceptance, all that stuff. But one of the first things I remember about these recovery meetings was the people who seemed to have recovery. And what was so exuding from them was the thing that I had been searching for in all the wrong places my whole life. Like they had this peace and this serenity, and they seemed, at least outwardly, to be genuinely like okay in their own skin. Like they seemed to be happy, they seemed to be content, they seemed to be confident, and they could just be who they were and feel what they felt and not have to be perfect and not have to be saints. And I had a couple nights where we would go out to the diners and they would laugh and have like the deepest, most joyous like laughter over like little shit that I was like, how are these people so freaking happy? Like they have seriously found something that I have been chasing in this bottle my whole life. And what I thought was finding it, what I thought was like that eureka moment when I was 15 years old of taking that drink, was this fleeting thing that I then had to chase that was just escaping me and destroying everything that I loved and cared about. And here are these people that seem to have found something like genuine and solid. And all my preconceptions about spirituality and wanting to have like think it was this certain thing without any kind of real life experience of it, these people kind of challenged that in me, because the only thing that I saw in the people that I was interacting with were that they were just like trying to be a better person every single day. Like, not that they were trying to be perfect, but that they were trying to personally develop. They were trying to grow. They were trying to be kinder and more loving and more tolerant and less hateful. And like that they were actively engaged in not being those things anymore, not hurting people anymore, and being as considerate as they could be and as compassionate as they could be. And I was like, what the, like, I couldn't wrap my head around all of that, but there was a deep part in my heart and my spirit that was seeing the happiness and the light in them and being like, I think that they might have something. And there was the other part of me that was like, there's no freaking way. Like, these people are lying. There's no way anyone can have that. And so I had this like internal war of doubt that everyone in the recovery rooms was lying and, was secretly miserable, and that this was their mask and their facade. And then I had this little seed of hope that, like, whoa, what if though? Like, what if they actually have discovered something and they're actually living this life where they're okay, and they are okay without drugs and alcohol? Like, they can be sober and like happy and purposeful. And that little seed, even though I didn't fully believe in it, was enough for me to be like, okay, if this experiment, if I can go through this and there's a chance that I can get that, and if these people are telling me the truth, what do I really have to lose? Because I can always just go back to the misery and the anguish that I'm already in. There's like no hope in this. And so it was really powerful for me to see those demonstrations of love and light in the beginning, and to like try to trust in it a little bit. And that was, by the time I reached step 3, that was kind of that moment where I was like, okay, I'm making this decision. I'm going to go through with this process, and I'm just going to see what happens. And when I'm done with the 12 steps, I hate it and I still hate everyone here and I don't believe in it and it was all bullshit, then I can do whatever I want after that. But I'm at least going to commit to trying this thing once and giving it my best. And that was hard for me because I'm a perfectionist. And so to just commit to doing my best and being like, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm literally just going to do the steps to the best of my ability and not trip out about, you know, understanding every aspect of it, was a surrender for me in and of itself. And to this day, like that decision to do it, to try it, to trust in it, whatever, and to treat it like a fucking scientific experiment, was to this day like one of the best decisions that I've ever made in my life, because it changed the course of the rest of my life, the past 9 years. And I'm just so grateful for the miracle that of the change and the transformation that that process has given me. I went from this terrified, insecure, afraid person, not to say that I'm never insecure or terrified anymore, but like, I went from that being my entire existence and identity to getting to actually feel what it feels like to be at peace, to be able to walk around in the world and like, um not be tripping out about what's going to happen next or what I don't have, or I mean just like all of the endless yammering that was going on in my head of fear and doubt and all that stuff. And so it's like I didn't even know what it was like to have a quiet mind before, this journey. And I think um like, alcoholism to me at its root really was like that internal condition of not being okay. And the addiction part of it for me is like the fact that my method for treating that is to consume whatever I can get my hands on external, to um to try to numb that and to try to treat that. And that once I start, I lose control over it and I lose control over the impact that it has on the rest of my life. And so to find a way, the steps to me are a way to treat that internal condition and to change me is the thing. It's like nothing in my life had to change. Like nobody else had to change. Nobody else had to heal. All these situations that I thought had to line up, the job and the fucking then the school and the this and the that, like nothing else had to change. All I had to do was move through the steps, this methodical process of like do this and then do this and then do this. And that was what my sponsor gifted me. Like um I didn't really view her as like this guru who had all of the answers for life, or who was supposed to be perfect, or who was supposed to be, some being to put up on a pedestal. She was just an alcoholic drunk, just like me, who felt all of the pain that I felt and tried to treat it the way that I tried to treat it, and lost control and made a big mess, and then discovered this way of living, of trying to be a better person and doing the next right thing and all this simple stuff. And literally um was showing me what she did. That's all she did. She just shared with me, hey, these are the things that I did to change who I am and to heal and to recover. And these are the things that I continue to do to work on that and to grow and to change and to become better. And, this is what I'm learning and this is where I'm at. And so it was such a simple and um non I don't know, like for me as a person who wants to overthink and intellectualize everything, which I still love to do. That's why I love like literature meetings and all these different kinds of meetings, is I love looking at things from different angles and I can still really enjoy that. But recovery for me is just action, and is just this like doing even like the simplified steps that it's just this series of like living this way and doing these things, and then as a result it doesn't really matter too much how I think or how I feel when I'm doing them, if I'm just willing to kind of move through the action of doing them, and then I get to feel what the results are. And I don't know, I feel like um I don't want to be one of those like people that goes on and on about how wonderful and miraculous my life is, because I always, feel like I um gag myself when I hear it or whatever. But like then when I start sharing and talking about what the change that occurred, then I kind of can't help myself to be like, dude, it's so beautiful and it's so simple, and I really am so grateful for the support and the existence of this thing, that like I don't have to do it alone, and I don't have to understand it all, and I don't have to know all the right answers, and all I have to do is show up and share and be vulnerable and be who I am and do the next thing, and it'll be okay. And so I think I'm sorry, my cat is wanting dinner now, so I apologize. You hear him, Wolfie, screaming in the background. I promise I'll feed him after this. But I'm still a little spaced out and getting back to the ground beneath my feet. I've been in recovery. I've been sober now for 9 years. And the last 2 years have by far been the hardest emotional years of my recovery. Because 2 years ago, my best friend in the program, my business partner, my best friend, my brother, basically in this way of life, um, passed away from this disease and didn't make it. And so I have a lot of like deep feelings about that I am still processing and still holding. And it's this weird dichotomy of like being really freaking grateful that I'm okay, that I'm here, that I actually get to experience peace from the pain of addiction, and not, and then that also holding space for the fact that, like, he's not here anymore, and, he didn't get that peace maybe, or he didn't get as much of it, I don't really know how to eloquently put that, and I'm still kind of holding that and learning how to be real about that because 'cause I'm fucking in it, I miss him every day, and I don't really think that I know or need to, like, understand why. I don't think these things happen, like, for a particular reason. I just think that this is life and life is death, and, um, it's all part of this experience, and so it's crazy that I am able to move through that experience, um it's crazy to me that I was able to move through that experience sober and to turn to my family in this program and to turn to um my support and my program and just go back to the things that I've always done, doing the practices that we do here and make it through it, and it's still raw and it's still real, and so I share that too, to be like, I'm not just the rainbows and the unicorns and, like, everything's great and I was miserable and I did the steps and now everything's wonderful. It's just like life is still happening and I'm still grieving and I'm still in pain, but the thing that this recovery life has given me is now I can move through anything and I do not have to pick up a drink or a drug in order to be okay. And I can move through it sober with all of the intensity and pain and acuteness of the emotions. And I can experience all those things with the clarity of mind, of sobriety. And I can decide how to move through those things as gracefully as I can, with as much kindness and compassion for myself and others as I can. And that is what this way of life has given me. And so, I yeah, I hope for anybody that is new to this thing, that is, like, on the fence, I always just hope for everyone to find their way to some kind of peace and relief and freedom, freedom from suffering, and whatever that journey looks like for you, you know, I hope that you find it, and I hope that you know that there's tons of people out there that love you and want that for you. And I'm guessing there's a lot of them in these rooms tonight. This is a great place to find people who are just genuinely supporting in the fact that they just want the best for you. We hold space for those that are still suffering because we know what it feels like to be suffering. And we want everyone to have freedom from that. And if they can find that somehow, some way here with us, I hope that they can. And I hope that we can honor all of those that haven't found that, like my best friend Conrad, and you know, send love to everything that he taught me and all the ways that that friendship changed me. Um, yeah, and so again, thank you for letting me share, and I hope if I've shared anything that um I don't know, that maybe that there's that seed of hope, that there's something here that is different, that can offer a new way of life that's better than you could ever expect it to be, you know? Um, and maybe it just takes a little bit of openness and willingness to give it a try, even though it's really weird and it seems really foreign, and maybe all the shit that I've said seems very vague. It's that one-on-one moving through it and doing the actual, like, action that is the simple part of how it all works. So yeah, thank you for letting me share. I think that's all I have tonight. I don't want to ramble on. I do appreciate all of you, literally from the bottom of my heart, just even being able to be here and practice getting out of my shell and sharing about like my emotional experience the last couple of years. So thank you all for the space.